This is the Sony A7iii. Some would see it as the perfect all-round camera for hybrid shooters. Its compact, weather-sealed body, full-frame 24.2 megapixel, 35.6 by 23.8mm CMOS sensor, which has a diagonal length of 42.82mm and a surface area of 847.28mm squared, 4K 24 and 25 FPS recording with no crop, 120p Full HD recording, dual card slots, 5-axis in-body stabilization, built-in log profiles, focus peaking, zebras, customization, and more. While others would see this as being overcrowded with complex menu systems, delayed firmware, questionable colour science, badly designed microphone inputs, internal battery charging, and awful folder organisation. In this video we're going to be answering the question, is the Sony A7iii still worth it here today in 2020? We're going to be looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly with this camera, so without further ado, let's get started. So I was originally a Nikon shooter when I first started out in photography. Then I moved to Canon, then I moved to Sony before purchasing the A7iii. So I'm not afraid to jump ship when I feel that it's necessary to do so. I bring this up because I don't want you to think that I have a lifelong bias with Sony cameras. I'm shooting on a Canon 5D camera right now, for example. That being said, I did purchase this camera myself, so do take what I'm saying as just my own personal opinion when I answer the question of whether the Sony A7iii is still worth it here today in 2020. So let's go through some features that this camera has to offer for hybrid shooters. Colours and picture profiles. It has the Sony Venice colour science, which comes from Sony's cinema lineup. It's not quite as nice as Canon's, but it's still way better than what it used to be like in some of their previous cameras. In classic Sony style, they've packed more picture profile settings than most of us could ever need, including in Gamma, Movie, Still, Cine 1-4, ITU 709, S-Log 2 and 3, HLG, and HLG 1-3. Not to mention all of the other customizations within the PP or picture profile menu. I will just say that it does still take a little bit of work to correct the skin tones. Check out this test footage I got when I first got the camera. I'm using the picture profile settings that I revealed in a previous video, which I'll link down below in the description. By adjusting the curves, I achieved a skin tone that I was pretty happy with. Photography. The 14-bit RAW photos that this camera produces is incredible. It shoots 10 frames per second raw uncompressed photos with continuous autofocus mode, which is very respectable. It offers a silent shooting mode, which does have its flaws. Shooting in silent mode can cause some skewing artifacts and banding, more noticeable in artificially lit environments. However, having tested this out myself, both indoors and out, I can honestly say in adequate lighting and shooting slower moving subjects, you'd never know that these images were taken with silent mode. It's certainly not a feature I can see myself using anytime soon, but it's nice to know that it's there if I need it. Video. The A7iii shoots 4K using the whole 6K sensor with no crop, both in 24 and 25 frames per second. If you're shooting in 30 frames per second, there is a slight crop of 1.2 times. This doesn't affect me personally, as I live in the UK and the standard other than 24 is 25 frames per second. Not 30, so it really doesn't affect me whilst I'm living in this country. It shoots up to 120 frames per second in Full HD with no crop. Not only this, but it also still has autofocus. That being said, when you do shoot in 120 frames per second with the Sony, you do lose a little bit of colour. The image seems to get a little flatter for some reason. I will just say that I would recommend being very careful when shooting S-Log in 120p, because it really starts to fall apart when applying heavily grading on the footage. Overall, the slow-mo straight out of the camera is really solid though. There is both a mic input and a headphone jack, along with a micro HDMI, USB 3.1 Type-C and USB micro B multi. It's also worth mentioning that you can have the video right to both cards, as it does have dual card slots, something which the famous 1DX Mark II doesn't offer. You can also assign photos to one card and videos to the other, or RAW files to one card and JPEGs to the other. I have heard online that a handful of people are experiencing some overheating, however this isn't something that myself or the vast majority of consumers are experiencing. In-body stabilization. The IBIS in this is really helpful, especially when using slower shutter speeds in low light, shooting photos, or handheld video. So yeah. The autofocus. The autofocus in this system is incredible. It doesn't have the latest AI-based autofocus found in the A9 and A6400 onwards, but for a 2-year-old camera, the autofocus is still up there really close with Canon. The low light performance. The A7iii is incredible in low light. Not quite as good as the A7S II and the A7S III, but you have to remember that those cameras have half the megapixels of this one, which vastly helps with the low light performance. Finally, the ergonomics. The ergonomics of this camera is okay. I wish it was a little bit beefier like the A9, as my little finger does just start to slip off the bottom of the grip without having a battery grip on it. But that is being a little bit nitpicky, I suppose. So to answer the question, is the Sony A7 III still worth it here today in 2020? I'd say yes, absolutely. Overall, for the price, this is one of, if not the best camera for hybrid shooters under that $2,000 mark. And the fact that it's already 2 years old is pretty unbelievable. Down in the description you'll be able to find links to where you can pick this camera up, along with links to all of the equipment that I use to make this video. If you like the video, then don't forget to give it a like. It really helps me out in beating the YouTube algorithm. Comment and let me know which camera you think I should question its worth to next. Finally, subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated with all of my future uploads. As always, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.